Hey Scott, how are
Hey,
you?
all right. How are you, Gil?
I'm doing good, but I haven't got a shirt as nice as that one.
Really? Thank you. I know where to get one.
Yeah, I
Uh,
appreciate that.
it is great to see you, my friend. You've done so much for my life. I have to tell you, I come as a big fan as well as a journalist and host, but it's just your music and what you're doing with Metalworks, just a major impact on everybody's life out here in the music world. So we appreciate you.
Geez, thanks. That's I don't know if I deserve all that, but
Uh, I think so. And let me introduce you first. Not that you need one. I have Mr. Gil Moore with me, drummer, songwriter, singer for the legendary band Triumph. Gil is also the owner and CEO of Metalworks Studios, Canada's largest studio and one of the most decorated in the world. Triumph were recently named the Canadian Record Store Day ambassadors. They released a 40th anniversary box set of perhaps their finest work, Allied Forces, on Roundhill Records. And Gil, I just, again, I can't tell you how much it means to me for you to take the time to be with us.
thanks, Scott. I'm happy to be here. Happy to circle back to the 40-year anniversary of this album too, and all the great fans that have supported us over the years and continue to do so. It's really
Yeah.
awesome.
I love seeing it. I come across Triumph fans all the time, and it's a brotherhood. It's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. Um, Now, Metalworks, I'd like to talk a little bit about Metalworks before we get into that. It's grown so much. It was such a pivotal part of the Allied Forces record, I think, just in its infancy at that time. But you have Metalworks Studios, which is six separate studios now. You also have Metalworks Institute, which you are churning out people that are winning Grammys and just changing the world musically. I mean, you deserve every ounce of that that those accolades. You're doing wonders for the world of music in all ways. Would we have gotten the Allied Forces record the same way? Would it have been the same record if it wasn't for Metalworks Studios? If you had gone into phase one like you had in the previous albums, would it have been the same record?
No, not sound wise. There's a big difference in the set. We recorded at Sounds Interchange originally and Phase One. Those were the two studios that we worked out of before we recorded our Allied Forces, the first record we recorded at Metalworks. Big difference was the big room in Studio One. We built it as a pine walled room, sort of on the same, it has a bit of the same tone as Power Station had in New York. So
Yeah.
phase one had a more absorbent sound room. I'll say just generally more absorbent, and uh, so I would say the Sounds Interchange was similar. So the studio was more resonant, I would say. So studios have certain I'll say they have reverb times, and they have a certain room compression based on the room size, and they have reflection characteristics in the same way, say, that a guitar, another wooden instrument like a guitar or a violin would have. So a studio is the same thing if it's made of primarily wood.
Right.
And so I think that it's like taking a certain color that sort of goes right across all the recordings in the room. Of course, the engineer has a lot of discretion on what to do to sound shaping tools and so on. But to your point, yeah, I think the record has that one paintbrush that goes right through it. That's the tone of Studio One and the console and the outboard gear in that room particularly.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course it's an amazing record. Is it Triumph's finest hour? Is it a personal favorite for you?
That's a good question. Uh,
Because
I was funny. I was just talking to my son-in-law here before the interview, and I was talking about what a nitpicker I am. Uh, you know, and I said, I always look at things like a kind of that perfectionist, like I see what's wrong before I see what's right.
Right, right.
So I do the same thing with Triumph Music. I listen to all our stuff, and I have a hard time just being a listener. So often I'm going, oh man, I wish I could do that over again. That vocal could
Right.
be this much better, or that drum lick could have just been this much smoother, or but in all honesty, somebody on the 40th anniversary, I forget who was it, prompted me to do this and said, "When's the last time you listened to the record all the way through?" And I said, "Oh, I haven't done it for a dog's age."
Mhm.
So I threw it into my car and I made a note. Okay, I'm going to listen to it all the way through, which I did. And I will admit it kind of took me on a trip back to that space and time. And I allowed myself to be a listener instead of being a nitpicker and a band member for once. I don't know how I was able to do it, but I did. And when I was just a listener, I liked it, and I thought, man, that's pretty cool. Uh, I'd forgotten about "Fool for Your Love." I hadn't listened to that song at all for so long, and I kind of got a charge out of that right out of the gate. And it got some moments on there for sure. We were young guys.
Yeah,
We were kind of at the top of our game, I guess.
yeah, I'd say so. My personal, I grew up with the early records. The first
Mm.
record, Rock and Roll Machine, and things like that. But as time went on, it just got even better and better, I think. And the Thunder 7 record just sits so dear to my heart. I just love that record. All of them I do. I listen to all of them all the time. That one just touches me in a certain way. And I think it's, that's the beauty of especially Triumph music. I think all of the songs in particular, not only as albums in full, touch people in different ways. It's a little bit different than the normal band. That's the beauty of Triumph, I think. Um, Around that time, 79, 80, you did Progressions of Power. The production credit went from Mike Levine to Triumph. And the writing also, the credits for the writing are by Triumph, other than, more Emmett, and an occasional Levine in there. What was the time like in that time of the band, personally, in making those credits as Triumph? That was the Three Musketeers period, that all for one for all. What was the time in the band like at that time?
It was really fantastic because we were past the stage of being underdogs, if you will, like all bands are when they start out. You're an underdog and you're just trying to get recognition, get a few fans, and sell some tickets. And it seems like having a band actually break out is a dream come true, because most bands fail. Let's face it, 99.99% of them fail. So in all my earlier bands and Rick's earlier bands and Mike's earlier bands, just like it's like any band that was successful. Look at the bands they played in prior to, and they were all failures. So you suddenly get the right combo or whatever, the magic, and the right chefs in the kitchen, and then something happens. It surprises the heck out of everybody in the band. I think all bands are the same way. Like I don't know any band like some of the best bands, like BTO couldn't get a record deal. Rush couldn't get a record deal. Boston couldn't get a record deal. Like how could you not give Boston a record break? But so I think the thing right then, and maybe it's I'd forgot that we made that decision internally. We just sort of went, you know what, we're all working so hard on this stuff. Let's just say Triumph instead of trying to take any kind of individual credit, regardless of the fact that nothing had really changed. In other words, Mike Levine, clearly was the producer in the band. It wasn't me. Rick had a little bit of a hand in the producing. I really didn't. I tried a couple of times and I realized I was terrible, so I fired myself.
And you ended up with the studio.
I was good at certain things, but being a producer is not one of them. Mike was obviously the main guy all the way through our career in that regard. And and as a writer, I think Rick was the strongest writer. He was the most creative, and he had the most ideas. And most of the stuff that I wrote, I had to come to him because my piano skills weren't strong enough for me to figure out all the chords and really articulate the melody fully. I always had concepts, so I would say to Rick, I have something that goes like this, and I would sing it to him. He would interpret what I was singing on the guitar. So you can imagine how that rolls out with a drummer versus, he was classically trained, so he could create harmonies and so on, things that, and actually Mike Levine was very strong in that regard too, because Mike could play much better piano than I was capable of, and had much better understanding of music theory. So, both Mike and Rick really were able to take things to a higher level, I'll say. So, but you're identifying something's correct at that moment in time. We just decided, oh, it's kind of one for all for one, and that's why it says Triumph on everything. And we
Yeah.
were not feeling like the underdogs anymore. I remember once, we're doing a radio interview. I don't even remember what station it was. It doesn't really matter. But in the first couple of sentences with the interviewer, the jock said to me, Gil, it used to be, maybe you guys were trying to get on radio. Now you're the sound of radio. And
Yeah.
I thought, boy, that was a zinger that hit me, and it was sort of a realization that, yeah, we were part of the sound of the era, and we've been embraced by all the radio stations in America. And now, instead of hoping we were going to get airplay, the airplay was kind of just coming at us. So that
Yeah.
was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is. Is there a song that sits closest to your heart?
Um, Well, when I look at our catalog overall, there's
Yeah.
a lot of songs that I like that didn't receive a lot of airplay, and then there's, of the ones that received a lot of airplay, I have my favorites. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I think of the songs that became iconic. I think probably "Fight the Good Fight" is my favorite, but a song like "Allied Forces," which is right on your shirt.
Yeah.
Um, we played Allied Forces, for example, in every single concert we ever played. We never played a concert once that song was written. The next time we were on stage, we played that song, and we played it every single night for our entire career. So it didn't receive as much airplay, but it's kind of one of those fan favorite songs. And when our tribute album, which is being done right now in Mike Klink in Los Angeles, you probably heard, is recording a tribute
Yeah.
album. And so Phil X was the first musician that was approached by Mike to work on the tribute album. And he said, you know what, you're the first guy, and I'll give you your choice of any Triumph song. And he picked Allied Forces. So when the tribute comes out, it's Phil X was really the guy that grabbed onto that song. So different people have different relationships with different songs, and I'm no different. So, but yeah, I think if I had to pick one, it'd probably be "Fight the Good Fight." I mean, as a drummer, I liked playing it too. It was a fun song to play.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's all. It wasn't a boring song to play.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can remember as a kid listening to that one, turning my speakers out my window so everybody could hear it. Definitely a favorite. Um, did the three of you get together while you were getting this box together? And did everybody have input?
Yeah, I mean, Andy Curran, who's a dear friend of the band, he was hired by Round Hill in the same way that Mike Klink is the curator of the tribute album.
Mhm.
Andy was the curator of the box set, and Andy's a dear friend, lives here in Toronto. He's a great musician himself, and he worked very closely with the guys in Rush, and he's the bass player in Coney Hatch. And Andy basically showed us everything. Like he ferreted through all the stuff, and he made all the creative decisions and or suggestions. And honestly, we went along for the ride because he was so spirited in his approach to it, and um, he just did such a good job. I mean, you just had to watch him and go, well, we don't have much to say. He's got it nailed. Just let him go.
Uh,
So we owe him a real debt of gratitude for how well it turned out. Because at the end of the day, when he plunked it on our, brought it back to Metalworks here and plunked it on the desk. We all looked at it and went, oh my God, this thing is fabulous.
It's, and I've seen it in video, and I've seen it in pictures. Now, it was extremely limited. There was no copy at my record stores. As far as reissuing any of the material that's inside of it, because there was so much in it, a beautiful book, and all kinds of, the vinyl, the Live in Cleveland. Will any of that, will we see that in any other form, like, perhaps just the double live set in Cleveland, or any parts of that come out separately?
I think so. I mean, it's not really up to us. It's up to Round Hill Records. What they decide to do, but they consult with us. As far as the limited number of copies of the box set, I mean, that was intentional on their part.
Mhm.
Again, that was it was their decision. I think it was because they wanted to work with Record Store Day, and Record Store Day, I think, maybe suggested that they wanted to have it super rare. I think it sold out in 1 day or 2 days or something like that. We felt like we wish there were more copies, because we're getting feedback from certain fans. Oh, I couldn't get it. I could, my neighborhood, they didn't have any or whatever. So I mean, we would probably, as a band, encourage Round Hill to print more copies of it and make it more available, or if not, do what you said and take componentry out of it and make various pieces available. I know all our merchandise companies that work with us, they're all saying, hey, give us some, we'd love to have it, so hard to say where it'll actually go, Scott. Like I said, the Round Hill have their own designs or marketing plans or whatever for what they do with the stuff.
Right. Right. Oh, I'd love to get my hands on one. I gotta tell you, it's beautiful. I've seen it unboxed, and just gorgeous. Um, Magic Power, a huge hit, of course, from the record. Uh, I've heard Mike talk about this. We may not have had that song if you didn't ask yourself, what would the Who do with this song? And that just got me thinking, that the Who must have been a big influence. So why specifically would you ask yourself, what would the Who do? Why wouldn't you ask, what would Zeppelin do, or whoever? Why specifically the Who? And did you do that with many songs? Any other songs?
I think so, because you grow up and everybody's riffing off those that came right before them. The problem is, you don't want to be a copycat musician. And I know when I'm kind of mentoring kids now that come along, and they say, what are some of the keys or whatever. One of the things I tell them is, I said, well, try to find your own signature, whatever that is. How do you do that? And I go, well, part of it comes down to the combination of the musicians. And I just said this in a previous interview. I was saying, well, so Mike was, came out of an R&B background. I came out of more like a Southern blues, Chicago blues, and somewhat R&B background. Rick, classical, progressive. So you've got these guys that are, different influences. So those bands, and you can see it if you look at a band like Led Zeppelin and you go, okay, well, these guys are listening to Howlin' Wolf. Like,
Right.
you can see that or the Rolling Stones, the same way they were listening to blues bands. So I think each group of musicians, they're looking to guys that are, a few years older than them, that came right before them, because that's when they were fans. And so you can't help that. So if we're sitting there in the studio and we're working on something and we think it sucks, we're going to try to get inspiration wherever we can get it.
Mhm.
And I think all musicians and bands do that. So I don't remember particularly saying, well, what would the Who do with Magic Power? But I just know what it's like. It's like arm wrestling a pig, in the studio sometimes with songs to get them to sound, really well. I mean, there were times we went in the studio. Like, Lay It on the Line is a perfect example of this. We went in the studio and Rick was, hey, I have a song. It goes like this. He strums it on his guitar and he sings it. We go, bingo, 1, 2, 3, 4. boom, and away we go. And the thing is, 15 minutes later, we're like, there's nothing left to do. And then you have other songs, that, like it's like a rodeo. You're trying to last through the scare. The thing is running away from you, and you go home and you go, this thing's terrible. Like, let's scrap it. It sits like on the junk heap for 2 weeks, and then you bring it back. And let's try that old thing again and see if we can make something out of it this time. So that's I think, what you do sometimes. You say, well, obviously we're doing a bad job. Like, well, what would Led Zeppelin do with this song? Or, what would the Who do if they were stuck? I don't know. It's just, you're kind of grasping at straws, but sometimes it works.
It definitely worked that time. Probably the biggest Triumph song, right? Magic Power, incredible. And Thunder 7, like I said, is near and dear to me. Throughout the years, it has been. It's really the first record that you guys gave up production responsibilities, or seemingly in the credits, and got an outside producer. Eddie Kramer, of course, classic Eddie Kramer. Tell me about that decision and how that experience was.
Well, I love Eddie. And what I love about him is a kind of a crotchety Englishman. And I like crotchety Englishmen. And yeah, I remember in the studio, and I was trying to sing some of the high notes and Follow Your Heart. And he was getting very abrupt on the console, and he'd be like, okay, try that again. Run the tape again. And go, one more time. Like, really kind of no bedside manner whatsoever. And then I'll give you one more chance. And then finally he goes, Gil, I don't think you can do this. How's that for encouragement? And I'm on the floor, and I got all this respect for Eddie Kramer. He's on Led Zeppelin, he's on Jimi Hendrix, and I'm like, Eddie, give me one more chance. I'll be okay. Like, I just need to take a break, whatever. And yeah, what an awesome guy. And interestingly, he's living up here in Canada now.
Oh,
yeah, I've been talking to him for a couple of years, but I try to circle back with him because he's a great memory, and he was one of those guys that when you work with him, you never forget it. Like, he was the only producer I've ever seen that when he sits at the console, and this was even when automation on consoles started, he would take the faders in his fingers like this, and he would play them like he was playing the piano, and you watch him sitting behind the board, and he'd be moving his arms around like an octopus, and he'd be moving faders like a fraction of an inch, and he was actually kind of mixing on the fly. And it was just something else to watch. I've never seen anybody do that before or since.
wow.
But we're talking about the guy that mixed Woodstock here. So,
yeah,
he knows a thing or two. He's not exactly a rookie.
No, he's been to that rodeo before. Yeah, what was the decision to bring him in? You've done, you guys produced all your records, and Mike's, produced the records. What'd you say? Hey, let's get somebody different.
Well, Mike needs inspiration too. So, when we work with David Thoner, when we work with Eddie, whoever, anytime we work with an outside producer, it was really just to add another chef in the kitchen and go, okay, what can this person, bring to the table? Unfortunately, it eventually backfired on us with Ron Nevison, but
yeah.
all the other guys we work with, we loved them all, but Eddie, Eddie's a classic. He still is a classic. And man, I was watching that Kiss biography, documentary. Our documentary's coming out, as you know.
Yeah.
Pretty soon. So I'm watching band documentaries, and so I watched the Kiss one, and there's Eddie in the documentary, and Gene Simmons is talking about him, and I went, "Yup."
That's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think everybody that's worked with Eddie has tremendous respect for his talent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's so obvious, has he ever cut a record that wasn't, just stellar and phenomenal?
What he also did, Scott, too, at Metalworks, what I really liked is he spent time with me on the studio, even in Venerable Studio One, which we were talking about earlier. And he was like, hey, Gil, I got a few ideas here. Like, I think if you do this over here on this wall, and I think this change here on the floor, and blah, blah, blah. He had these really cool ideas, and I listened, and we adopted his ideas to Metalworks Studios. And I've been able to kind of parlay that advice and so on, because it took me forward into the newer studios, Studio 6 primarily. I can think of, I look at that and I go, yeah, Terry Medvedik was our beloved acoustician. And not to take anything away from his design, but I had kind of like Eddie Kramer sitting on my shoulder as we were designing that room. I could hear Eddie saying, things over here as we were talking about the acoustic principles and stuff. So I learned a few things from Eddie that I've had with me my whole career.
Ah, that's so special. It really is. That's great to hear. You've had a lot of special moments in your career. The US Festival comes to mind as a monumental moment, at least as a fan watching. Sweden Rock Fest for a whole number of different reasons, alternate to that. The opening of Metalworks. Is there a particular moment in the history of the band that sits closest to your heart? Greatest moment for Triumph history?
Yeah, I don't know if I could put my finger on it, but the the magic, it starts really early, and it's the magic of actually having people like you. So I find with young bands, it's hard because you're conditioned to failure, and you can't get a job. No one wants to make a record, and I think those obstacles have become less apparent because now you can use a computer and get recording software. We didn't have those benefits, so we were there were gatekeepers to a lot of this stuff. You can release your music on the internet now. No one can stop you. So we didn't have those things. So there was always this guide with a stop sign saying, back to the bands I mentioned earlier that couldn't get record deals, even though they turned out to have huge careers. So, yeah, somewhat, I would say the magic moment was just in the very, very beginning, the first 3 or 4 shows, when suddenly we realized, that this was unlike any audience experience that I had ever had, or Mike had ever had, or Rick had ever had with our other pre-Triumph bands. And we realized, hey, these people are freaking out. Like, back to the Kiss documentary, I remember Gene talking about it, and they show this video of them playing in this crummy little club. And he said when Ace and Peter and Paul and I played, and they showed this video, and here's Kiss, and they don't even look like Kiss, and they're playing this
Right.
dumb. And he goes, but when we went on stage, we knew there was some magic there that we didn't, we'd never experienced before. So I
Mhm.
think that's a highlight. Another highlight would be the first time I ever heard our song on the radio, and we had released our first album, and the big radio station here in Toronto at the time. I was driving my car, and I had I was dialed in waiting to hear. Oh man, I hope they're going to play our record. Never heard a Triumph song on the radio before, and then boom, on it came. Here's this new band called Triumph. Check this track out. I turned the radio up. That was a highlight.
Yeah.
Having my mom and dad at Maple Leaf Gardens, which is the big arena here in town,
Mhm.
being able to send a limo and chauffeur my parents into the big arena and see 15,000 people screaming for a Triumph, and knowing what that meant to my parents. You
Yeah.
go, I don't think anything beats that. Mom and dad, nothing beats that. The US Festival, of course, what can you say? Biggest show in the history of California, or probably in the US. I don't know that there's ever been greater attendance at any event ever for music
That
than
was
than
huge.
Heavy Metal Sunday.
Yeah, that was just huge. And I mentioned Sweden Rock, and maybe not the greatest sounding gig for you guys, but a really special moment. Reuniting you guys after so long. Um, what was that moment like at Sweden Rock?
Well, Sweden Rock was amazing for a number of reasons. One, Rick was sick right up until the last second we went on stage, and we didn't know if we were actually going to be able to perform. He got violently ill
Oh,
the day of the show, and we thought, oh my God, and there was a doctor looking after him, and
wow.
this was after, you can imagine, like, for us to go and play again. we'd had 50 rehearsals. The last half dozen rehearsals we had in Sweden at this amazing facility that the Rolling Stones rehearsed in that sounded fabulous. And then at the last second, all of a sudden Rick is sick. We might not be able to play. We finally
Oh,
he makes it on stage. He doesn't look sick on stage. He looks okay, but the guy was really suffering. I mean, he was a trooper. And we go to play, and I haven't played on a big concert stage, obviously, in a long time. And they had subwoofers underneath the stage that resonated somehow in a bad way with the drum mics. And so we started to play, and I had this kind of unnatural feeling of that was making it very hard for me to play drums. Like so hard, it was like being a race car driver, and some guy gives you a set of glasses that are the wrong prescription, and
right, right.
you're going. That's what it felt like for me on stage. The good news was, we were able to reunite, the three of us, which was unbelievable. And of course, we flew down to Dallas after that and played at Rocklahoma on the big Saturday night. We were the headliner on the Saturday night that year at Rocklahoma, and that turned out to be another, episode that could have gone really wrong. The day after we left, a tornado came through and blew the stage down.
Oh,
So those two gigs were special for a lot of different reasons. Some good, some not so good.
wow, what an adventure. And Rick made it through. Incredible. Now you mentioned the documentary. So let's talk a little bit about that. It's Sam Dunn, Banger Films. He's done so many great documentaries. Are you guys, how much are you looking over that? Or is it just kind of happening around you?
It's finished now. They just finished it in the last few weeks. And while we were doing it, it seemed like it took forever. And they were doing ZZ Top. They released ZZ Top's movie, some time ago. And I think maybe 6 months ago now, I think the ZZ film came out. And so I love ZZ Top. They're almost my favorite band. So I'm asking the film crew. They want to talk about Triumph, and I want to talk about ZZ Top. So it's very funny. They go, Gil, shut up. We got to interview you. Oh no, I want to know about Billy Gibbons. Come on, tell me some Billy Gibbons stories. And anyway, we had a great time. Sam Dunn is an awesome director, and Mark Riccardelli, of course, who worked with him as co-director. He did an incredible job, and he was he directed his own edit. And I think his edit was a masterpiece because it's not easy the documentaries are tough because you're patching together. It's kind of like doing a quilt, and all the pieces of the fabric don't really match. But when you put it all together, it's a nice quilt. I think
Right.
documentaries are a little like that.
Yeah.
Like I found the same thing watching the Kiss one the other night. Is it's like all this stuff, but somehow it weaves together when you listen to Paul and Gene.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and that's it's got to be extremely difficult, and for the continuity of it alone, watching it, I can't wait to see this. This is it's exciting. It's got to be exciting. Have you ever, over the years, have you thought about writing? Do you keep a diary or anything like that, or some kind of record of daily feelings, or a notebook of memories for yourself? Have you ever thought about like writing an autobiography?
Um, I've taught, you know what? My problem is, Scott, I have too many ideas and I'm doing too many things at once. And I've always been like that. I'll never stop. I have no interest in retiring whatsoever. And so I'm always taking on new projects, and kind of sometimes to my own detriment. So I've thought about books. I've been approached by a couple of authors that want to, kind of work with me.
Mhm.
And I would like to do it. I'm not sure what it would be about, but I think if I was to get into a project and roll up my sleeves, what I would want to try to do is figure out a way to pass forward some messaging to young people, about that are interested in music, about how to get through, what appears to be a maze, today there's a maze that's just different than the maze that was there when we started. Now it's all like social media and, TikTok and what do I do next? It's like, where do you start?
Yeah.
So, uh, yeah, I think that would be my interest is explaining that, look, anybody that, pick any band you want. None of them knew what they were doing, you
Mhm.
know. They kind of, bobbed and weave into some situation that ended up, okay, now we've got a band that sounds pretty good, but we still don't know how to get anywhere. They get a manager. Generally, the managers that appear to be smart, they're only smart because they figured it out as they went along. They didn't know what they were doing either.
Right.
So that's kind of the nature of enterprise, right? You look at anything. I mean, Jeff Bezos looks smart because Amazon works, but what if it doesn't work? Or what about when he started and it wasn't working? It wasn't Amazon until it was Amazon. Triumph wasn't Triumph until it was Triumph. There's all these in between stages where, I think there's a fine line between fear and confidence. So, as we were going, I've had people say to me, "Well, did you know the band was going to be, really successful?" And I went, I had the confidence, that we would be after the very first couple times we stood on stage. I went, how can we fail? People really love the band, but I
Mhm.
also had the fear that they wouldn't. I had the fear that
Sure.
we're going to go the next day and we go to turn the lights on and the switch just doesn't go on. You
Right.
know, so I always live with fear and I live with confidence, and I had more confidence than fear. But if you lose your fear and you're overconfident, the next thing you know, you're over the tips of your skis. And in my opinion,
Right.
you're headed for the guardrail and you just don't know it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've got to keep that healthy sense of, hey, I got to earn my stripes every day. And that doesn't just apply to music. I think it applies to anything. So
Mhm.
I just think that's a life lesson that would be kind of cool to weave that into a book about music. A lot of people wouldn't think it necessarily applies, but like I think it applies to anything, any sort of anything worth doing is worth doing well, and
Mhm.
that's not that snakes and ladders element that you have to deal with at all times.
Absolutely. That sounds like a beautiful preface to a book to me right there. That is so true, really. It's the way to live life for sure. Um, ever do you play? Do you still play? Ever consider a solo record?
Um, I've thought long and hard about doing solo recording, and man, oh man, would I ever love to do it. And I just don't get around to it because of what I said 5 minutes ago about biting off all these other things. I've even made a song list. I've made a song list of cover songs. I've made a song list of blues songs. I've thought about originals. I've thought about working with Mike and Rick and every combination. And it's so stupid when I'm sitting here with all these recording studios, but the other interests that I have taken precedent. And I think it's simply because I've been in the studio, I've made records. I it's a part of my life that I don't want to say I'm finished with it. I'm not finished with it. I love music, but it's something that I feel like I reached a certain milestone or a certain base camp on the mountain with that. And I've always been a bit of a jack of all trades. So, as I've moved over, like at Metalworks, we do live production. So we have a big sound and lighting company. Love it. Staging events. And then we have the school. I love the students. I love the challenges in education. And and I have 3 kids. So there's 3 projects right there.
Yeah.
I
That's
love
for
the
sure.
kids.
That's
So
for
it's
sure.
a case of balancing all that. And do I ever get back in the studio? Do I ever write a book? We don't know. We'll just have to see how life plays out.
Yeah.
I'd love to do both, to be honest.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. Do you have a top thing that you want to do that you haven't done? Like a bucket list item?
I think right now the number one thing I'm trying to do. I have a company that is it's a startup, a tech startup. That's it's well, there's two I should say, and one is an educational platform, and what it would do is it would provide free music education to youth. So every what I think is really troublesome, and this is really worldwide, is that we've now entered the age where almost every young person, say 7 years old, 8 years old, maybe even 6 years old, they get a mobile device, they get a phone. Their parents want them to have a phone, even in third world countries, is the first thing that young people are getting whenever they reach that point, whatever age it is. The first thing they want is a mobile phone to get connected to the world.
Mhm.
Well, I see the need to share music education to all those folks, because right now, in Western society, where you get, kids with affluent backgrounds and so on, by the time they're 12 years old or whatever, they get a Mac laptop or something, and they can buy software packages that are expensive, and then they start trying to learn. But it's really, music education kicks in high school and then in post-secondary. And
Mhm.
this gap of, I'll call them elementary school learners, and you can see how engaging music is and how much kids love music, but they've really been kept outside the tent. And so this one project I have revolves around trying to get those young learners on a global platform on the cloud that they can get for free. That's going to teach them, so that they don't have to go through what I went through trying to learn music. Where it was very hard to learn music. I think it should be easy. Because music, we've
Yeah.
got, how many divisive forces do we have in society right now, pulling people apart from each other, people
Mhm.
fighting with each other over this, that, and the other thing. Why don't we concentrate a little bit of our time on spreading music where cultures can actually get along with each other and people can
Absolutely.
collaborate, and you know I can learn your rhythm, you can learn my melody, and so on and so forth. Music's a really great thing. So that's one thing that I'm spending a lot of time on. And then the other startup that we've sort of incubated here at Metalworks is about three-dimensional projection and virtual seats at concerts and things like that. And that was born out of my interest in, we were, asked so many times by the promoters to bring Triumph back live. And I started looking at holograms. And, my friend Paul, who is a great lighting designer and is really kind of the godfather of hologram technology, I went out and saw holograms up close, and had a long discussion with him. And I said, well, I'm not crazy about holograms as I'll call it a concert format. I just don't think it works, particularly for rock and roll. It might work for certain artists, but not a Triumph. And we pursued another technical avenue about producing holographic effects in a mixed reality format. So that's what I'm working on. So I'm hoping to actually bring Triumph back to life. We call it MXR Vision. So that's something I'm really excited about. And we've had lots of demo trials and so on with different aspects of the technology here at Metalworks, and hoping to advance that over the next few years.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. And I have to ask, have you talked with Mike and Rick about this whole idea?
Oh yeah, yeah. They think I'm nuts. They just think I'm, you know. They go, there goes Gil again with another idea of his. But it's been like that always between us, right? There goes, So, yeah, I think on MXR Vision, I think Mike originally was kind of skeptical, but as he's seen the progress and he's seen things start to actually materialize, I think he's fully on board.
Cool.
Rick hasn't been quite as close to it. I think he's still going, well, maybe Gil's crazy, but but I think Rick knows me well enough to know that I'm not really crazy. So he's probably thinking, "Oh, we'll see if he can pull it off." You know.
That's great. And I hear you talk about Rick, and I hear you talk about Mike, and it's just, as a fan, your mom and dad to us, you know what I mean? And we don't want to see mom and dad fight. You know what I mean? And it's so great to hear that you guys are talking and you sound like brothers. It's just there seems be a lot of harmony, and it's really close to hear, for me. It's just great to hear that. It really is. Uh, so
Yeah, since we reunited with Rick in 2008, so I mean it was like 13 years ago now, and so it's been smooth sailing, and it'll always be smooth sailing. I assure you. Yeah.
yeah,
It was like you have a fight with your brother. If you get over it, I mean, getting over it is wonderful.
yeah,
So I think it was 2007 or two, it was just before the shows that we played in 2008. And we've never looked back. I mean, there's never been like oh, here we go again. We're going to start fighting with, no, that's never,
Yeah.
no, there's never going to be another, there will never be another, I will make this prediction. There will never be another fight in Triumph. It will never happen. No, we're in such a good place now. And it's pretty cool. Rick was here just the other day, mastering a new one of his projects in our in the mastering studio here at Metalworks, and so we were able to hang out a little bit. It's pretty cool.
That is great, man. I tell you that it makes me emotional to hear that. It really does. It's beautiful. You've had another one of my favorite people there, Lawrence Gowan. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, he's just a beautiful person as well as an amazing musician who comes with an entourage of amazing musicians. Recorded at Metalworks, of course, and yeah, like I say, you've done so much for music with your own music, and now with Metalworks, and the Institute is just so special, and we appreciate you. Uh, the documentary, when can we expect it? Do you know?
Yeah, it'll be this fall. And when it might, well, will it come out in America at the same time? I'm not sure. Canada, it'll be fourth quarter this year for sure. If it's simultaneous in America, then it'd be the same time. And if not, my guess would be, first quarter of 2022.
Okay.
So,
Any what's the distribution going to be like? Is it a DVD or is it a Netflix kind of thing, or?
that's to be determined. Again, in Canada, it's on free TV, on the Bell Media, which is the biggest television network in Canada. So it'll be on free TV. I'm not sure how many broadcasts, whether they'll play it once, twice, or three or four times. I'm not sure about that. And then the Canadian, I guess, equivalent of Netflix, which is Crave, which is also Bell Media, it will be on Crave in Canada.
Yeah.
Whether it'll do a theater run or not remains to be seen. And what the launch platforms in America and international remain to be seen. So I think typically what they do is when it hits a film festival, which we're hoping to get that confirmed shortly. That's when I think a lot of those decisions get made, is once it's presented at a festival. So
Cool. And the tribute record, is that on its way?
yeah, it's sorry, I didn't catch the last bit.
Is that on its way? The tribute record?
Yeah, the tribute is, I would say, maybe at the 50-yard line. I think Mike's got a little more than half of it in the can now. So, of course, he hasn't mixed anything. But the list of musicians is unbelievable. And the feeling for the three of us, like the fact that all these guys, I mean, every single musician on this record is got a great, they're superstars. All of these guys, they're the best of the best. And it's a tribute to Mike too, because when he picks up the phone and calls, these guys are like, yeah, I'm doing that, I'm down for that. So it's fantastic, and I'm hearing it like in bits and pieces. I know he recorded Joey Belladonna from Anthrax the other day.
Nice.
My buddy Sebastian Bach, of course, he's coming up. I think he's on the in the bullpen right now. So there's all these musicians that have got fantastic drummers too. Like Kenny Aronoff, like doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tommy Aldridge is on it, for crying out loud. Love Tommy Aldridge. I mean, I could go on and on about all the people on here. Nita Strauss, I mean, the best looking guitar player, the best playing guitar player, and
crazy.
Yeah, so just they can say so much about all these folks. We're just so honored that they're doing this, and can't wait for it to come out. But no wine before it's time. I'm going to say the tribute album. I'd be shocked if we saw it this year. I think it's possible, but there's a lot going on this year with the film coming out, and then the box set, and then if there's a rebound on the box set, or as you said, the components out of it. So could be 2022, but maybe late 2021.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not going to ask you about getting together and recording and but when you release a documentary like this and then you release a tribute record, you're going to get that.
We
So,
actually play in the one thing in the documentary. I will say is we actually play live. We Mike, Rick, and Gil are on stage playing guitars and drums on stage in the film. So it's
that,
a kind of it's I don't want to give away too much about it, but it's a neat segment.
that's can't wait, can't wait. It's a beautiful thing. Gil, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, and I know how many strings are in your bow. It's just it's such an honor to talk to you, and I thank you so much for your time.
Anytime, I really appreciate it. It's great talking and fun chatting about Triumph.
Yeah, it's just so great. And I think about Metalworks, and I'm in Chicago, so it's a few hours up.
Not
You know,
far.
yeah, it's not that far. Can I get a tour if I come down to Metalworks?
Oh, 100%.
Uh,
And you'd be surprised the number of people. We got a sort of a standing rule here that uh, anybody that just calls our main number off the internet and says, "Hey, I'm a Triumph fan," it happens. We're in Toronto. We're on vacation. Any chance we could come by? We always, always, always say yes. So
that's
you
that's
never have to worry about that.
man, that is just awesome. Yeah, and hopefully someday soon, I'd love to do that, and love to connect with you. That'd be great. Uh,
We're really grateful to the fans that have supported us, like I said at the beginning of the interview, and a lot of the memories that come back for us, like Chicago, and starting at the Aragon Ballroom before
yeah,
before we got up to playing the big arena. Was a great experience, and the Chicago fans were unbelievable. They follow us all through Illinois and over into Indiana. Some of them would come all the way to Ohio and New York. I mean, it's
yeah.
some serious fans in Chicago.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I was right there. I grew up about a mile away from the Aragon, so yeah, that's just it. As a kid, it was all about Triumph, and you mentioned all those people on that tribute record. They were all touched like I was by you and Mike and Rick and Triumph Music. You did so much for so many people. Music wouldn't be the same without it, and like I say, we so appreciate you.
Thanks, brother. I
All right.
appreciate you
Yeah.
too.
Thanks so much, Gil. I hope to connect with you soon.
You bet.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, have a good one.
Thanks so much. Bye
Bye.
bye.